Hey, welcome back to Xamarin for Absolute Beginners. Alongside Jerry O'Brien, I'm Christopher Harrison. In the last module, we took a look at the basics of Xamarin, kind of set the stage of why it is that you might want to use Xamarin. But obviously, again, if you're going to use Xamarin, you need to install it. And in order to install it, there's a few little prerequisites that you need to be familiar with. Now, of course, you could use Xamarin just to write, say, Windows mobile apps or just to write Android apps. Yep. But chances are, if you're going to do this, you want to target them all.
Yes.
So if you want to target all platforms, you are going to need two things. You can have Windows either running as parallels on a Mac or locally installed on, say, a little Surface Book or the like. And again, the big thing about that copy of Windows is it cannot be virtualized, not able to use a VM. The reason for that is you are going to want to use the emulators. The emulators do require virtualization. You can't virtualize inside a virtualized environment. I think I said that right?
Something like that.
Something like that?
Virtually.
Okay. Virtually.
Yes.
I virtually said that correct. So anyway, so you do need to have an actual real installed copy of Windows. You also will need Mac OS X. This is a requirement if you're going to be targeting iOS, so then that way it can compile properly and do everything that it needs to be done. But if you take a look at Jerry's setup over here, and he's got just a couple of devices going on over there. I love the fact that you've got the phones hung off of there. There we go.
I'll add the third phone.
There we go. Perfect. Yeah. So we've got the whole setup over here. But you'll notice that he's actually got his Mac sitting over to the side, and he's going to remote into that when he wants to start working with iOS. Mm-hmm. Again, you could do all your development on a Mac, but if you just feel more comfortable in Windows and want to do all your development on Windows and have a remote Mac, you can go that route. Now, in order to do the installation, you'll notice that this is available as an option through Visual Studio. Make sure that you put the little dot next to custom, which chances are you probably do anyway. And then you'll notice that you've got cross-platform mobile development. Put the little check right there next to C#/.NET Xamarin. And then from there, you do the installation. And it looks, well, a little bit like what, Jerry?
Well, if we switch over to my PC, we'll start taking a look at where we go for installing on the PC side. Obviously, as Christopher talked about, we're going to need Visual Studio because we are developing in .NET after all. Mm-hmm. And what better tool to use than the free Visual Studio 2015 Community Edition. Mm-hmm. So it's a full-featured IDE, and if you're not familiar with it, let's say you're an Android developer or you're an iOS developer coming to Xamarin and you're kind of new to the PC or the Visual Studio platform. If you go to visualstudio.com, then you can download Visual Studio Community 2015. Now this is a web installer, so that means that when you click on this button, it will bring up the web installer, downloads your short little .exe. You click on the run button, and it will go through the process of starting the install. And eventually, you end up with this little screen where you get to choose the options. And as Christopher mentioned, if you want to do the Xamarin development, you need to select at a minimum the cross-platform mobile development option. And you'll notice that underneath of it, it says C#/net or .NET, and it has Xamarin in parentheses. The reason it's grayed out, and I have this wonderful little blue icon, is because I didn't want you to sit through the install routine, so I already have it installed on my computer.
But that's what the screen looks like.
That's what the screen looks like. The other reason I wanted to show you this screen was in the event that you already have Visual Studio 2015 Community Edition installed, but you didn't put the cross-platform tools, you can simply go into the control panel and you can say, I want to change Visual Studio install, and you can basically come up to this screen and select that option. The other thing I wanted to point out as well, that we don't always deal with when you're installing your tools, but for the Android development, Visual Studio also has an emulator for Android, and I love to choose that. Of course, I'm the kind of person that I select all anyway because I like everything. As Christopher mentioned, the gadgets that I have here, I need it all, right? So I install everything.
More toys.
The Android development tools and the Android NDK that we actually install on Visual Studio gives us a built-in Visual Studio emulator, which is similar to the Windows 8.1 phone emulator. And it's got a lot of really neat, cool features and tools for you to work with. So we would have Visual Studio installed on our computer. Once it's done, you're almost ready to go, but we need to complete one more installation routine. So let's step over to the Mac, and I'll show you where you need to go on the Mac to be able to complete your installation routine. So on the Mac, where I'm at currently is what we call the Xamarin homepage. And in order for you to do development for the iOS portion, so if you want to actually develop for the iOS application side of it, including all of your mobile platforms, you're going to need to have the Xamarin platform installed on the Mac. And how you do that is select the products drop-down and choose the Xamarin platform. Now, what this does is, you notice it says you can create native iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows apps in C#. One of the things that we need to be aware of is when we download this tool, it will install something called Xamarin Studio. You can basically scroll through and see all the specific information that you have available down here, but you will actually get a Xamarin Studio product that gets installed on your Mac. Now, with the Xamarin Studio, when you create a new solution, this is a very important differentiator to understand. We cannot create Windows apps on Xamarin Studio on the Mac.
Okay, that's important.
That's important. We can only create iOS and Android apps in Xamarin Studio on the Mac.
Okay.
And I keep saying on the Mac because we can install Xamarin Studio on the PC.
Right, so and do everything there.
And do everything there, right? But because the Mac doesn't really support that Windows virtualization, etc., it's just iOS and Android on the Mac machine.
Okay.
Okay. Now, once we install Xamarin Studio on the Mac, we also get something called the Xamarin Mac Agent. And if you haven't updated recently, the Xamarin Mac Agent is what used to be known as the Xamarin Build Host. So we had something called the Xamarin Build Host that ran on the Mac. That's the component that is required to link your PC to your Mac for building the iOS-based applications. And the reason that you need that, this is an Apple licensing requirement. Apple only licenses the emulator and the build engine to run on an Intel-based Mac. So that's why you'll need to have the Xamarin Studio with the Mac Agent installed on the Mac, and your PC and your Mac able to connect to each other over the network.
Okay.
And as Christopher mentioned, you can certainly install Parallels for desktop on the Mac. And as you can see on my Mac, my start screen is annoying me. There we go. If we have Windows 10 up and running, Windows Parallels, we can start up Visual Studio 2015. I have it installed under Windows 10. And once again, it's one machine.
Right.
So I have the Mac Agent, and I have Windows and Visual Studio running, and we're ready to go.
So just to differentiate here, just to say it one more time, so if I do it in Visual Studio on Parallels on a Mac, I can now target all three of those platforms.
All three platforms.
But the Xamarin Studio on a Mac, I'm only able to just do the two.
Correct. iOS and Android.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And it's important, too, because the Parallels desktop app on the Mac is not technically the virtualization that you were talking about earlier. So we can run the Windows Phone emulators under Windows 10, under Parallels on the Mac.
Okay. So that's not virtualized.
Correct.
That's not virtualized.
Yeah.
Now the installation on a Mac, I'm gonna assume is pretty straightforward, just like installing any other piece of software.
Absolutely.
Nothing really fancy.
Nothing you have to worry about. Wizard-driven, step through, answer the questions, you're off and running.
Okay, and that will give us that Mac Agent, that will give us the Xamarin Studio. So now we've got Visual Studio set up on your Windows box. We've got the Mac Agent on Mac OS X.
Yes.
It seems like the next thing then to do is to, create a project.
Yes.
We'll do that in the next module.